You good? Good morning, everybody. My name is State Representative Jared Solomon. I represent the 202nd in Northeast Philadelphia. And we are here today, bipartisan coalition, to say that we have a housing crisis in the Commonwealth. As everyone knows, we have a housing crisis across the nation. So what are we going to do about it? What I did with my friend and colleague, Rep. Hogan, is we did 6 discussion groups across the Commonwealth, 4 in Southeast, 1 in Harrisburg, and 1 in Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, all to attempt to identify why is this happening and what can we do about it. I think there was a general consensus on what is going on. In fact, I think that all of my colleagues up here, Republican and Democrat, are all rowing in the same direction when it comes to identifying why we're in this crisis. One, there are just too many rules. There are way too many rules. And NIMBYism is now everywhere. It is in all of our 67 counties. Folks who are saying, no way, no how are you building in my community. These take the form of lot restrictions, of parking restrictions. And these really had an impact in Pennsylvania, in the Northeast, and in the western part of the country. So rules, and this has been going on since the 1970s. Second, just economic factors, right? 2007, 2008, we had an economic crisis, the Great Recession. And between 2010 and 2020, we had the lowest number of residential homes built ever in our country. So we have rules, we have market fluctuations, and lastly, we have the pandemic. Between 2020 and 2022, the inflationary pressures in the housing market, inflationary pressures in housing went up by 42%, the largest increase ever. So what happened? Of course, Fed raised interest rates. This increased the 30-year housing mortgage, which jacked up the monthly payments. In addition, insurance rates and taxes have also increased. All of this is bad for affordable housing. Rules, market fluctuations, and the pandemic. So what does this mean for a young person in Pennsylvania? In 1991, the average age of a first-time homeowner was 28. Now, it's 38. So, if you're young and you're thinking of building a family, having rootedness in a community, you used to have that trial and error period in your 20s. Now it's pushed into your 30s, sometimes in your 40s. We need to do better for young Pennsylvanians. So we asked the folks around the table, what could we do? And this is what all of these folks are going to talk about. Once we identify the problem, how do we solve it? And these solutions sort of went into 3 main buckets. One, at the local level, we need to do better to move localities, to get rid of bureaucratic burdens. Number 2, agencies at the state level like DEP and PennDOT, we need to find a way to get rid of some of the red tape. And lastly, we need to turn to a more pro-housing agenda in Harrisburg. Just a couple examples of the policies that Rep. Hogan and myself are moving forward on. First, on the local issue, we want to create incentives for localities to do really good housing, pro-house supply side housing initiatives. What developers have told us time and time again is, when you're at the local level, a local municipality will say, we're not building unless we have a new traffic signal, or we're not building unless our new rec center is built. So at the state, we want to say, in high impact, high density, high growth areas, we want to provide that incentive to you to adopt really good pro-housing initiatives. Number two, in terms of agency, we want to look at agencies and how we can best move through some of the bureaucracy. One of the things Maryland did is they created a housing ombudsman, which works with agencies and localities to hear and then solve issues that are holding back development. And lastly, on some of the overarching housing policies. If we're creating all this housing, we need to make sure that we have workers that are going to do the work. So we need to ignite the building trades and others to do this work. This is especially an issue in rural Pennsylvania. So we want to provide a fund that trains and allows localities in rural Pennsylvania and throughout the Commonwealth to do this work in our local communities. We have a housing crisis in Pennsylvania, and this group of legislators is addressing it head on. Thank you so much. I want to now turn over to Representative Joe Hogan, 142nd Legislative District in Bucks County. Joe.
So I think we should have coordinated this a little bit, because I was going to say a lot of the same things that you just did. So I'm going to be able to make this pretty brief for everyone. It's no surprise that Pennsylvania is facing a demographic crisis. We all know this. It's having issues in our budget. Young people are leaving. Our population is getting older. But a lot of people also recognize the opportunity that Pennsylvania has. Governor Shapiro just a few days ago signed a massive billion-dollar investment with a pharmaceutical company. The southeast of Pennsylvania is already well known for pharmaceuticals. Allegheny County out west near Pittsburgh is on the cutting edge of a lot of AI development, and Pennsylvania is sitting on energy reserves that's only second to the state of Texas. We have a huge opportunity to grow our economy in Pennsylvania with diverse industries, blue collar, high tech, white collar, building trades. But in order to do that, workers need places to live. I grew up in Levittown, Bucks County, the quintessential suburb. It's where World War II vets moved out of the city. They got affordable housing. They went to the steel mill. They could find a job. Those homes today are out of reach for far too many people. And when you talk about housing, I like to talk about community housing. And what I mean by that is you need people to live in the community if they're going to work in the community. Volunteer firefighters, they can't afford to live in some of these communities that they serve anymore. Nurses, teachers, they're coming in from an hour away, sometimes farther. You need to be able to have housing where they can live, where they can afford to live, and make it obtainable. So as Representative Solomon said, we heard from stakeholders all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I think we have a good idea, we have a good concept, we have a good package, so I welcome feedback, and I thank my colleagues for working together on addressing this issue, and I hope that we can make some progress this session year. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next up, we have Representative John Angles, representing the 38th Legislative District in Allegheny County. John.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Pennsylvania is facing a serious housing and affordability crisis. We are not building enough homes, rents are rising faster than wages, and too many families are being priced out of the communities where they live and work. From 2017 to 2023, Pennsylvania ranked 44th among the 50 states on rate of housing built. In the same period, the average rent in the 23 Pennsylvania counties tracked by Zillow's rent estimate increased from $1,013 in 2017 to $1,476 in 2023, a 46% increase. Ultimately, housing costs grew at a rate faster than incomes and prices for other goods and services. To address this ongoing issue, we're introducing a package of common sense bills that address this crisis head on. Together, these reforms modernize outdated housing policies, remove unnecessary barriers to building, and expand housing options while still respecting local control and public safety. Today, I, alongside with Representatives Zimmerman, Kahn, Scott, Davidson, Solomon, Smith-Waddell, and Powell, introduced House Bill 2186 to allow accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, by right in areas already zoned for single-family housing. ADUs are small, independent homes, like backyard cottages or in-law suites, that can provide affordable housing for seniors, young adults, caregivers, or working families. But right now, many Pennsylvania municipalities either ban them outright or make them nearly impossible to build. This bill allows individuals the ability by right to create ADUs in areas zoned for single-family housing while still allowing municipalities to make reasonable restrictions on ADUs. It's a simple way to add affordable housing without changing the character of our neighborhoods, and we can't afford to keep blocking these solutions. This morning, we also introduced House Bill 2185 to allow by right the construction of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in certain single-family only zones. Home prices have risen more than twice as fast as income in recent years. One major reason is that our zoning laws haven't kept up with housing demand. This bill requires larger municipalities to permit small-scale multifamily housing while still allowing local governments to reject certain projects that might not be viable in their communities. If we want housing to be affordable, we have to allow more homes to be built, especially near jobs and services. I don't see Rep. Scott here, correct? I do want to talk about Rep. Scott's bill real quick before we introduce some of the other reps. Third, Representative Scott, Davidson, Zimmerman, and I introduced House Bill 2155 on January 26 to eliminate mandatory minimum parking requirements. While parking minimums were created with good intentions, they now drive up construction costs, increase rents, and waste valuable space that could be used for housing or small businesses. States across the country, including California, Colorado, and Florida, have already begun eliminating these outdated mandates. This bill gives Pennsylvania the chance to do the same and remove unnecessary costs that make housing less affordable. Lastly, for my bills, before other reps introduce theirs, in the near future, I'll be introducing a bill that focuses on transit-oriented development. Housing near public transit helps working families save money, reduces traffic congestion, and lowers energy use. Yet too often we underbuild near transit stops, exactly where density makes the most sense. This legislation will encourage greater housing density near public transportation, helping people live closer to where they work while strengthening our transit systems and reducing car dependency. Each of these bills addresses a different piece of the housing puzzle, but together with the bills introduced by my colleagues, they form a comprehensive approach to affordability, supply, and opportunity. For too long, our state has made it difficult for developers to invest in our communities. In other states, ranging from Colorado to California to Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, they've all begun making similar changes, cutting government red tape to spur housing development in their states. It's time Pennsylvania does the same. The time for affordable, abundant housing in Pennsylvania is now. The housing crisis won't solve itself. Right now, we're pricing out and excluding an entire generation of families from taking part in the American dream of home ownership. But with smart policy, modern zoning, and coordinated action, we can make Pennsylvania a state where everyone can afford a place to call their home. I'd like to thank my colleagues who have already taken time to co-sponsor one or all of these critical pieces of legislation. I especially want to highlight Representatives Solomon, Scott, Kahn, Smith-Waddell, and Davidson in their offices for helping lead the charge on getting these bills crafted. I'd also like to thank my office staff, especially Tom Dewar, who led the charge on a lot of these pieces of legislation and those getting here today. Additionally, I want to thank Representatives Zimmerman, Major, and Hogan for joining us as bipartisan co-sponsors on a number of these bills. This issue is one that faces the entirety of the Commonwealth, and it's great to see both parties coming together to address this crisis. I also want to thank the tireless work of the many housing advocates who had a hand in crafting these bills. I specifically want to thank the PA Housing Choices Coalition, the 10,000 Friends of Pennsylvania, Kat DeSantis, Stacy Reidenbach, John Geating, and Michael Gadini, for their tireless ongoing work in helping make these bills the very best that they can be. Thank you all for your time today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions on any of those bills at the end of the press conference. At this time, I would like to introduce Rep. Tarek Khan, followed by Rep. Izzy Smith-Wade-El, to introduce their specific pieces of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Rep. Inglis. Good morning, everybody. So in Pennsylvania, we are currently having our milkshake drunk by other states like South Carolina and Texas, because they're doing the right thing. They're doing things that are common sense in terms of housing policy. In Pennsylvania, we're still doing the old things where we're restricting the types of housing, the types of way that people can rent their own house. The way that things are being built is so restrictive that we have about 250,000 housing units that are short in Pennsylvania. This is why home prices are so expensive. This is why rent is so expensive, because we're not doing things that are common sense. That ends with this administration. That ends with this legislature. We've reached across the aisle to come together on common sense bills that get rid of excess regulations so that we can finally build and get people housed. I want to thank our bipartisan group of legislators that have come together on this package, and also the advocates who have been working on this to make sure. And we're bringing folks from the left, from the right, and the center, because this isn't a left issue, this isn't a right issue, it's a Pennsylvania issue. More specifically, we have a bill called the Golden Girls Law. Raise your hand if you have watched or know people who know about the Golden Girls. Okay, that was a weird phrasing. All right, so raise your hand if you watched the Golden Girls and at least know the theme song, right? Okay, I'm not going to sing it because that will be in your head the entire day, I guarantee you. But the important thing is that the Golden Girls, where we had 4 folks that lived together, three of them were unrelated, that type of arrangement is actually illegal here in Pennsylvania. In parts of Pennsylvania, that is illegal because municipalities have said you can't share housing with people that you don't live with. Now, we think that's ridiculous, and we also think that is restricting the types of housing agreements that people have. People are not renting to other people because it is illegal to do so. When I was in college, I lived with 3 other guys. None of us were related, and we did that because we were trying to afford rent. Now, that was 25 years ago. And the cost of housing has exploded since then. And we were barely making it, $500 a month. That sounds pretty good, right? $500 a month for rent that I was paying. Housing costs have gone up all across Pennsylvania. So we need common sense laws like the Golden Girls Law that would make housing arrangements like that legal, that would allow older adults to be able to share their houses, that would allow younger students to be able to live with other younger students and younger people who are trying to start their lives so they're not paying the $2,500, the $3,000 a month for rent. Let's start doing what makes sense. This is what these bills are going to do. And that's what the Golden Girls Law does. And we have our Blanche, we have our Rose, we have our Sophia on it. I think I'm the Sophia. Oh, he's Blanche, I'm Sophia. We have Democrats and Republicans on this bill. So let's get this bill across the finish line. Thanks for being here. Let's make housing affordable here in Pennsylvania.
Did anybody else notice that Representative Khan looked at me when he said Blanche? That's the kindest way I've ever been called out of my name in this building. Good morning, folks. State Rep Izzy Smith-Wade-El. I'm going to talk briefly about my legislation that is a part of this package, creating a statewide housing council, and more importantly, a statewide housing assessment so that we know where we do and don't have stock, where we do and don't have opportunities, know where there are houses that can be built, and know where there are houses that may need to be demolished or supported through their blight situation. administration, and frankly, we've all been waiting too long for leadership on these issues. So I want to thank the representatives here today for actually moving this forward, because our neighbors simply cannot wait any longer. Lancaster is my home, and there are a couple of pretty great Lancastrians in the crowd. Shout out Stacy, shout out Chad. I lost track of Kat, but she's here somewhere. She's behind me, isn't she? Yep. Okay, anyway, the point that I want to make is this. The house that I grew up in was the first house that a young PhD who had grown up in segregated Washington, D.C. could purchase at 947 Virginia Avenue. It had been built in 1922 alongside a row of 8 other semi-detached houses just like it for workers at the Armstrong plant just over the hill. We don't do that in Lancaster County anymore. Our light and heavy industry is located miles and miles away from the places, pardon me, where the people who work those jobs can afford them. And so we have pulled the rug out from under people who want to do what my parents did and what the first owner of that house in 1922 did. Perhaps most significantly to me, Chad Martin is over here. Chad works with a nonprofit called Chestnut Housing. All across the Commonwealth, there are small nonprofits, faith-related organizations, just groups of people who want to build housing that their neighbors can afford. They didn't say, I'm going to wait for government. They didn't say, I'm going to wait for a huge donor. They picked up and dug their hands in themselves to make a better Commonwealth for their neighbors. And our laws, and I think this is the reason we're all here today, our laws shouldn't stand in the way of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Tarek. Representative Dave Zimmerman has a few words.
Well, good morning. So, as most of you all know, and at least my colleagues here in the back understand, that I'm a huge proponent of saving as much farmland as we possibly can, and especially in an area like Lancaster County where I serve. And some of my colleagues are here also representing parts of Lancaster County. In order to save those farms, I'm a big proponent of doing some higher density. Also, we should have many more conversations about going higher. There's no reason that Lancaster City can't be going higher rather than building out, and so those are extremely important. So I'm delighted that this can be bipartisan work where we can have Democrats and Republicans work together to do better with housing going forward. And so again, if we can save farmland, get some more density, go higher, that's what it's all about. So happy to be part of all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up, we have Representative Nate Davidson. Nate.
Thank you, Representative. I realize I'm probably the caboose here, so I'll keep my remarks brief. A lot of great things have been said here already, so I just want to make a couple comments about this group. Look, this is a bipartisan group, and I think that's an important thing to note, that these issues around housing are multifaceted, complex, whether it's a first-time homebuyer tax rebate, like I'm working on with Representative Kutz, my colleague from Cumberland County, or mandatory parking minimums, or there's many ways we can address this issue, and we've talked about many of them here. But one of the threads that ties most of us together in this group, not all of us, and I won't call you out, but this is one of the younger groups in the legislature. And housing impacts all generations, but our generation, my generation, is particularly impacted. And I think that's an important note, that we have some newer members of the legislature, some younger members of the legislature who are addressing this issue head on. And later this afternoon, I'll be downtown Harrisburg, here in my district with Governor Shapiro. And one of the things we will be discussing is converting office buildings into housing, and doing that in our urban cores. Because many, many years ago, we removed a lot of that housing, and perhaps that was a mistake. So, everyone's on board in this effort to fix the housing issue in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Whether you're young or not, whether you're Republican or Democrat. We're all in this together. So I just wanted to thank the members here, thank the governor, and with that, I'll give it back to Representative Solomon.
Thank you. I know they're not speaking, but we're also joined by Rep. Rivera and Rep. Abby Major. Both have been instrumental in this effort. Now we're going to turn over to stakeholder groups to make comments about how we are all rowing in the same direction when it comes to increasing our housing stock in Pennsylvania. First, I want to just note they're not up here, but Sarah and Jill, if you want to wave, they're from the PA Builders, and they worked with me and Rep. Hogan on the discussion groups and are now putting together this package to move, hopefully, these pieces of legislation to the governor's desk. First up to speak, we have Kat DeSantis, who is the Policy Director for 10,000 Friends of PA. Kat.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm thrilled to stand with advocates, legislators, and leaders from across the state who are putting housing where it belongs, at the very top of Pennsylvania's policy agenda. We're here today on behalf of the Pennsylvania Housing Choices Coalition, asking the General Assembly to take action to allow for more homes. Our bipartisan and diverse coalition spans the state, from Philadelphia to Erie to Pittsburgh to York to Scranton, and from organizations like 10,000 Friends and the Housing Alliance to the Chamber and Americans for Prosperity. We're united in addressing the housing shortage. Housing is too important a problem to leave to a patchwork of local policies. Pennsylvania has a statewide housing shortage, and families in every corner of the Commonwealth are feeling it. People can't afford homes near their jobs, near transit, or near family. When the problem is statewide, the solution has to be statewide. It's time for the General Assembly to step up and set minimum standards that allow more homes to be built. The policies being introduced today are essential to addressing our housing shortage, and they work. Across the country, more than 25 states have adopted similar reforms to address housing shortages. And the results are clear. More homes are being built, families have more choices about where they live, and housing and transportation costs are beginning to stabilize. We urge the legislature to take urgent action to address the housing shortage, including setting statewide zoning standards through the legislation championed by Representative Inglis, and identifying creative incentive programs and removing key roadblocks through the legislation championed by Representative Solomon. Together, this legislation will bring more continuity to our housing laws and recognition that our housing markets are regional. It's time for the legislature to take a leadership role in creating the statewide blueprint framework that makes it possible to build the homes our residents desperately need. And these bills are an important step forward. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it to Leah from the APA.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the members of the General Assembly, agency partners, planners, advocates, and community leaders for being here today. My name is Leah Eppinger, and I serve as the president of the American Planning Association Pennsylvania chapter, and also the executive director of the Housing Authority of the County of Dauphin. I work every single day at the intersection of planning, policy, and people. And I see firsthand how the decisions made in this building shape the communities Pennsylvanians call home. So what is this challenge? Across Pennsylvania, the communities are working to increase housing supply that fits their local needs. Yet too often, overly complicated zoning and review processes slow down development, rehabilitation, and adaptive reuse. Today, we face a clear mismatch between the homes people want, what they can afford, and what's actually available. This impacts workers, seniors, and young families, and it affects our economy, our workforce, and our quality of life. So why does this matter? Housing affordability is not just a housing issue. It's a workforce issue, it's an economic development issue, and it's a community stabilization issue. The modern land use policies gives communities the tools to respond while still respecting the local character and local decision-making that our communities have come to rely on. So we need support in these key housing and legislation being proposed today. We urge that the General Assembly move these efforts forwards in a timely and thoughtful way with balanced solutions that expand housing choice and strengthen communities. So what do we support? We support ADUs, the smaller home on the same lot as primary residence, attached or detached. In many communities, ADUs are still prohibited or heavily restricted. Legalizing them can create lower-cost rental options, support seniors aging in place, enable multi-generational living, and give homeowners more flexibility and stability. That missing middle housing type. These include duplexes, triplexes, townhome, quadplexes. Once common across Pennsylvania, senior family-only zoning limits these options, reduces supply, often driving up costs. Allowing these homes by right enable gentle and neighborhood-scale growth that fits naturally into our existing Pennsylvania communities. Pre-approved plans and pattern books. Pre-approved plans that design streamline the permitting process, helps reduce review time, support local and small-scale developers, deliver housing faster and without lowering standards. So what does the evidence show? In states that allow ADUs, these homes often rent for nearly 20% less than comparable market rate units. They're frequently used by seniors, students, and young workers. States that allow for duplexes and fourplexes are seeing these home types return, often at a significantly lower price than single-family detached homes. So modernizing zoning and housing policy means faster reviews, faster permits, and most importantly, more housing. And more housing means stronger, more resilient communities across Pennsylvania. The decisions made on this legislation will shape Pennsylvania's neighborhoods for generations. We have an opportunity here to align our policies with the realities that our residents face day in and day out, and with the future that we want to build here in the Commonwealth. I thank you for your leadership and your commitment to ensuring Pennsylvania has access to safe, welcoming, and attainable place to call home.
Thank you so much. Last, we have David Gonzalez, who is the director of the York County Economic Alliance. David.
All right, good morning. I'm David Gonzalez with the York County Economic Alliance. It's the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Corporation in York County. On the surface, housing availability and affordability is an economic issue. Addressing it will support the competitiveness of our workforce, our families, our businesses, and our communities all across the state. Across York County, a recurring theme for our employers is to share how difficult it is to recruit and retain talent. I dare say that is the narrative across the Commonwealth. And the housing shortage we are facing is one of the main reasons of that challenge. Improving housing access and innovating the types of housing units that can be built and renovated is a key solution to address the shortage. This is so ever certain when we are starting to experience a cost constraint in York. Some data for you all is that the average two-bedroom rental unit has eclipsed $3,000 a month in York County. The average home sale, $1,300, goes for $299,000 in a home sale for York County. Downside is that the average household earns about $82,000. So to afford that average home price of $299,000, you have to make about $90,000. So you see the clear disparity there. That's why we need to desperately rethink our approach. When we allow more homes in existing neighborhoods and communities, businesses gain more employers, and that adds more to the talent pool that we have in York and across the Commonwealth. A more reliable workforce and happier employers who spend less time in traffic and to from work when they're closer to their proximities. The housing shortage has cost Pennsylvania more than $14 billion in lost economic output, over $9 billion in less than personal income, and over 100,000 jobs not generated across the state. That's a study of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce found that this severe economic impact is affecting Pennsylvania yearly. We know that this ability to recruit and retain workers is key to our success. Businesses more easily attract and retain employees when workers can find homes they can more easily afford and are closer in proximity to the amenities that they desperately need: transit, childcare, groceries, healthcare, you name it. We support creating more homes in existing neighborhoods like backyard cottages or ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes to help communities grow up in the more modern era that we're experiencing. That's supporting job retention and encouraging economic activity across the Commonwealth. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, David. Any questions? Steve. The question was, and if anyone else wants to jump in, how much is there regarding economic incentives versus how much is it about leveling the playing field, cutting red tape, bureaucracy, right? Yeah, and I think that's sort of the breadth of the group that you see up here, Steve, right? You see Tarek and Izzy and Zimmerman and Irvin, who was here earlier, and Hogan. We're all saying it's an all-in approach when it comes to housing. And what that means is you really need to address every single bucket that I framed out earlier, which you have to deal with the local hurdles. It's essential that we deal with the bureaucratic issues at the state level. And then we need a reset and a redefinition moment when it comes to, we need to think really broadly about setting broad housing policy at the state level. And I think a comprehensive policy requires us addressing all of those three. Question is, do we expect pushback from local folks? Well, we're in a Commonwealth. We have 2,500 municipalities. Each of those has their own local government. And so built into all of our proposals, for instance, the RED program that I talked about, which is Ohio-based. Ohio shares a lot of characteristics that we have right here in Pennsylvania, is to provide certain incentives. So we want you to be pro-housing, and we want to help be a ready and willing partner to get you there. So if you streamline zoning, if you expedite permitting, if you put everything online and digitize the process, if you do some of the things that John's talking about as a matter of right, duplex, triplex, et cetera, then what we're going to do is provide that incentive to help get you there. So at least in the RED proposal, it continues to enshrine a sense of local control, but provides that incentive to help localities move in the direction that is going to increase housing stock. Yes.
Whitney Downer with Pennsylvania Capital Star.
Hi, Whitney.
So it sounds like you're trying to give a more carrot approach, but that sounds like you need some funding, and we're getting into the budget very soon tomorrow. Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges and potential pushback it will take to get something that requires funding through the budget.
Sure, Whitney. The question is around funding, given that the governor is providing his budget address tomorrow. I think for the first time, we have a governor who is squarely addressing the housing crisis here in Pennsylvania. And we want to be partners in the legislature in that effort. Many of the proposals, Whitney, do not require $1. And we share amongst all of us a commitment to those. The RED proposal, for instance, would require dollars, and we need to first begin the process to see if we can get buy-in on the legislation. And like every budget season, as we move through the budget process, there's going to be an effort on all the legislators here to prioritize housing. And when it comes to incentives, we hope that we can carve out a portion of any new dollars towards providing that towards housing incentives in PA. Other questions? Thank you all so much.